The man who did 30 seconds of work 6 years ago looked me in the eye and said, "You owe me $70,000. The worst part? He genuinely believed it. Opening. The email that allegedly changed everything. I was 21 years old, 3 months out of college, sitting in my childhood bedroom surrounded by printed resumes and a laptop screen full of job board tabs. You know the drill, the kind of job search that feels less like a process and more like shouting into a canyon and listening for echoes that never come. I'd applied to 40-something positions at that point. Heard back from maybe 8. Gotten 2 phone screens. 0 in-person interviews. My uncle called on a Tuesday afternoon. He worked at a mid-sized tech company, not glamorous, nothing that made people's eyes light up when he mentioned it at family dinners, but stable. Good benefits. Steady paychecks. He mentioned almost as an aside that they were hiring entry-level positions in the operations department. "Send me your resume," he said. "I'll pass it along. Worth a look." I sent him my resume within the hour. He forwarded it to HR with a note. I found out the exact wording years later, that read, "My nephew, good kid, worth a look." That was it. That was the entire transaction. I got an interview. Then a second interview. Then a job offer at $42,000 a year, which felt like a fortune when you're 21 and still on your parents' grocery bill. I called my uncle and thanked him. He sounded pleased. "Happy to help," he said. "You'll do great." And then I went and did 6 years of work that had absolutely nothing to do with him. Here's what I need you to understand before I get into what happened last month. I have never once denied that my uncle helped me. He did. He opened a door, or more precisely, he told me a door existed and said I could knock on it. I've thanked him for that. Multiple times. Over multiple years. Sincerely. What I've never agreed to is the accounting system he developed in the years that followed. The one where 30 seconds of typing became the foundational investment of my entire adult life. The one where worth a look became the cornerstone of a career he has decided, quite unilaterally, he is owed half of. I'm 27 now. I've been at that company for 6 years. I recently bought an apartment, $139,000, modest and mine, the thing I saved toward for half a decade. I'm currently a manager earning $87,000, having risen from entry-level through specialist, team lead, and now manager, each promotion earned through work I can document and skills I can demonstrate. My uncle is still in the same position he was in when he forwarded my resume. Same title. Same approximate salary. Same desk, probably. Last month, he took me to dinner and asked for $70,000. This is that story. Part 1. The career I actually built. Let me lay this out clearly, because clarity matters when someone is trying to obscure the facts with mythology. Year 1. I started at $42,000, entry-level, operations. I was one of 3 people hired in that cohort. I worked hard in the way people work hard when they're young and hungry and trying to prove something, not to anyone specific, just to the general universe of professional possibility. I stayed late without being asked. I volunteered for projects that weren't technically my responsibility. I made friends with people in other departments and learned how things actually functioned versus how the org chart said they functioned. Year 2. Promoted to specialist. 14% salary increase. This promotion was recommended by my direct supervisor, a man who, I would later confirm, had no idea my uncle worked at the company. He promoted me because I had outperformed my role metrics for 6 consecutive quarters and had demonstrated competency in a system that 2 other team members were still struggling with. Year 2, off hours. I started working toward a certification in operations management. Paid for it myself. Studied on weekends. Passed on the first attempt. Year 3, nothing dramatic. Steady performance. Built relationships. Became the person on my team that newer employees came to with questions. Didn't ask for recognition for this. Just did it. Year 4, promoted to team lead. Supervised a group of 5. Responsible for our team's quarterly deliverables. My uncle, at this point, sent me a congratulatory text that said, "Proud of you, always knew you'd do well here." I thanked him warmly. Because I was grateful for the introduction. Because at that point, the narrative was still wholesome. Year 4, off hours. Second certification. Paid for again by me. Relevant to the team lead role. Completed it in 4 months while managing a full workload. Year 5. Received a commendation for leading a process improvement initiative that saved the company roughly $200,000 in annual operational costs. This was my idea. My execution. My team. My result. Not one aspect of it traced back to my uncle's email 4 years prior. Year 6. Promoted to manager. Salary now $87,000. I oversee a team of 11. I run budget meetings. I hire and occasionally fire people. I present quarterly results to leadership. When I walk into a room at that company, people know who I am because of what I've contributed, not because of who forwarded my resume in 2018. Year 6, personal. I bought my apartment. $139,000. I had saved for 5 years, made calculated sacrifices, no vacations for 2 years, a used car when I could have afforded something newer, a very boring social life by most standards. The down payment represented discipline sustained over half a decade. The apartment represented adulthood achieved through patient effort. I will now tell you what my uncle contributed to any of the above. 1 email. 1 minute of his time, perhaps less. A referral that, as I would later confirm through HR, carried no actual weight in the hiring decision. It simply got my resume looked at, the same outcome I would have achieved through the normal application portal within a few weeks of continued searching. He sent 1 email 6 years ago. I've worked 12,000 hours since. He wants 50% of the outcome for 0.001% of the input. That's not investment math, that's delusion math. Part 2. The dinner and the demand. He invited me to dinner at a restaurant that was nicer than where we usually met, the kind of place that has cloth napkins and takes reservations and where the bill arrives in a little leather folder. I remember thinking it was slightly odd. We weren't close in the way that suggests spontaneous nice restaurant dinners. Fond, yes. Present at family gatherings, yes. The kind of close where you confide things or make real plans together. Not really, not for years. I thought maybe he had news. A promotion, finally. A life update. Something worth celebrating. Over appetizers, he cleared his throat and said he'd been thinking about fairness lately. I should have sensed what was coming from that sentence alone. I've been thinking about fairness is rarely the opening to a comfortable conversation. He laid it out methodically, which I have to credit him for. He had clearly thought about this, rehearsed it, arranged his argument in what he believed was a logical sequence. The thesis was this: without his recommendation, I wouldn't have gotten that job. Without that job, no career. Without that career, no apartment. He was the first cause of everything I had achieved. First causes, he argued, matter more than subsequent effort. The foundation is more valuable than the building. Therefore, he was owed something meaningful. Not charity, he was specific about this. Fair payment. Half, he said. Half of what? I asked. The apartment. It's worth $139,000, right? So $70,000. Or we could do equity, add me to the deed as half owner. Either arrangement works. I sat with that for a moment. You want $70,000 because you forwarded my resume 6 years ago. He leaned forward. I want what's fair. That email changed your life. Without it, you'd be, who knows? Unemployed, probably. Struggling. I gave you the foundation of everything you have. I deserve recognition for what I contributed. I did the math out loud. I couldn't help it. Your email took, generously, 1 minute of your time. You want $70,000 for that minute. That's $4.2 million per hour. I've worked approximately 12,000 hours at that company. I've studied for certifications on weekends. I've solved problems, built relationships, earned every single one of my promotions through documented performance. You want credit for all of that because of 1 email. He had an answer prepared for this. He'd thought about it. Without the initial opportunity, none of those hours would exist. I created the opportunity. The opportunity created everything else. The door opener deserves more credit than the person who walked through. That's just logical. I looked at him across the cloth napkin and the little candle and thought, he actually believes this. That was the moment the conversation shifted for me, not from pleasant to unpleasant, but from confusing to heartbreaking. Because the man sitting across from me wasn't being purely cynical or calculatedly predatory. He was sitting across from me genuinely convinced. He had told himself this story so many times over 6 years that it had become his truth. And his truth needed $70,000 to be validated. His recommendation, my nephew, good kid, worth a look. 30 seconds of typing. My contribution, 6 years of late nights, certifications, projects, promotions. He thinks those weigh equally because his came first. First doesn't mean most. Update 1. The investigation I didn't expect to need. I didn't storm out of the dinner. I'm not built that way. I told him I needed to think, which was true, not about whether to pay him, because that answer was immediate and certain, but about what was real and what wasn't. I wanted facts before I responded. I spent the following week quietly gathering them. First, I asked HR a general question, framed as professional curiosity about the company's referral policies. Specifically, I asked how employee referrals were weighted in hiring decisions. The answer was clear and unremarkable. Referrals get resumes into the review pile, but they carry no weight in actual hiring decisions. Interviews are conducted without awareness of who referred the candidate. The decision is made on qualifications and interview performance alone. I was hired because I interviewed well. Because my qualifications matched the role. Because I competed against other candidates and came out ahead. My uncle's name was not mentioned in any part of that process by anyone who made any decision. I also asked, as casually as I could manage, whether anyone remembered the circumstances of my hiring 6 years ago. 3 people had been involved in my interview process who were still at the company. None of them connected me to my uncle. One of them, when I mentioned we were related, seemed genuinely surprised. HR confirmed, employee referrals don't influence hiring decisions. Interviewers didn't know who referred me. I was hired on merit. His door opening was the same door everyone else walked through, the normal application process. Second, I thought about the job market context of that summer. I had been applying broadly. I had interviews at 3 other companies that month. One of them, I remember clearly, had called me back the same week my uncle forwarded my resume. It's entirely possible, probable, even, that I would have gotten a job somewhere else within weeks. My uncle's email didn't rescue me from a cliff's edge. It slightly accelerated one of many parallel paths. Third, and this was the hardest part to sit with, I looked at my uncle's career. He had been at that company for over 10 years when I joined. He had connections I didn't have. He knew the culture, the politics, the right people. If referrals and connections were the engine of professional success, his career should have flourished far beyond mine. Instead, he had remained in the same position throughout the entire period I had been rising. I had passed his level within 4 years of joining the company he'd worked at for a decade before me. He stayed in the same position for 10+ years. I passed his level in 4. If recommendations created success, why didn't his own career flourish? Maybe success comes from work, not from knowing someone who sends emails. I sat with all of this before I responded to him. I wanted to be fair. I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something, dismissing something that deserved more credit. But the more carefully I looked, the clearer the picture became. My uncle had done one small thing. I had done everything else. Update 2. The confrontation and the escalation. I asked to meet him again. Same restaurant, his suggestion. I think he expected me to come with a counteroffer. I came with facts instead. I told him what HR had said about referral policies. I told him that no one involved in my hiring remembered his name or his connection to me. I told him that I had been interviewing elsewhere simultaneously and that his email, while appreciated, was not the singular turning point he had constructed it to be. He didn't take it well. That's what they tell you, he said. But I know how things really work. My name carries weight in that building. People knew you were connected to me. It influenced everything, even if you can't see it. Or, I said, as gently as I could, maybe it influenced nothing. Maybe I earned my career. Which interpretation requires less magical thinking? His jaw tightened. I didn't come here to be insulted. I'm not insulting you. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. You've been at that company longer than me. You have more connections and more history there. Why hasn't your career advanced the way mine has? He bristled. That's completely different. Politics. Bad timing. My talents aren't recognized the way they should be. And there it was. The architecture of his belief system, fully exposed. His career stagnation, external factors, bad luck, politics. My career advancement, entirely because of his email. He had built a worldview in which he was the author of my success and the victim of his own. It protected him from a conclusion he couldn't afford to face. That success at that company had come, for both of us, from what we put in after the door opened. And one of us had put in more. When logic failed, he changed tactics. Fine, he said. If you won't acknowledge what I did, I'll tell people at work that you only got hired because of me. I'll tell the family you're ungrateful. I'll let everyone know what kind of person I'm dealing with. I looked at him for a long moment. So now you're threatening my reputation because I won't pay you $70,000. I'm saying there are consequences to ingratitude. I stood up. What you're describing is blackmail. I want you to hear that word, because it's the accurate one. You're threatening to damage my professional and family relationships unless I pay you money you're not owed. That's what's happening right now. He didn't respond to that. I paid for my half of the dinner, thanked him for the years of cordial family relationship we'd shared, and left. When I refused, he threatened to tell everyone I only got hired through him. Workplace blackmail. But his influence is exactly as powerful as his career suggests. Not very. The people who actually hired me know the truth. Update 3. The family campaign, and the clarity it brought. He followed through on his threat, partially. Over the following weeks, he called relatives. Told them I had betrayed him. That I had forgotten who helped me. That I was ungrateful and cold and had refused to acknowledge a debt that any decent person would recognize. He framed it carefully, not as $70,000 demand, but as basic acknowledgement, which was smarter than presenting the actual dollar figure, because $70,000 sounds insane out of context and acknowledgement sounds reasonable. Some family members responded the way he hoped. My mom, his sister, called me, voice cautious and uncomfortable. He did get you that interview, she said. Maybe you owe him something. Not necessarily that much, but something. My dad was less diplomatic. A recommendation isn't a business investment. He didn't co-sign your mortgage. He sent one email. Your son did 6 years of work. 30 seconds of typing doesn't entitle someone to another person's apartment. My parents were divided, but neither of them, even my mom, who was uncomfortable, suggested that $70,000 was a number that made any sense. The broader family response was more varied and, honestly, more clarifying than I expected. Some relatives took his side automatically, operating on a logic I recognized from 100 family dynamics. The older person who helped deserves deference from a younger person who benefited. They weren't doing financial analysis. They were applying cultural script. In their framing, I was the young ingrate and he was the wounded elder. But a significant number of them, when the actual facts were laid out, one forwarded email, no weight in hiring decisions, 6 years of independent work, a demand for $70,000, responded with genuine bewilderment. Several of them reached out to me privately. That can't be right. He wants what for what? That's not how any of this works. The family schism was painful in the way these things always are. Family gatherings became tactical. He wouldn't attend if I was there, or would attend and create a visible cold front. The holidays that year were quiet in the wrong way, the kind of quiet that comes from careful avoidance rather than comfortable ease. But the campaign also did something he didn't intend. It forced the people who cared about me to look clearly at what he was actually claiming. And when you look clearly at, I forwarded a resume 6 years ago, I am owed $70,000, most reasonable people arrive at the same conclusion. I did, during this period, worry briefly about his workplace threats. The idea that he might undermine my professional reputation at the company we both worked at. I spent about 48 hours anxious about this before I thought it through clearly. My uncle was not a respected or influential figure at that company. His decade of stagnation was known. His reputation was the reputation of a man who had coasted. Pleasant enough, not a problem, but not someone whose voice carried particular weight in rooms where decisions were made. If he told people I had only gotten hired through his referral, the people who actually hired me would contradict him. My performance record, my promotions, my commendations, my process improvement that saved $200,000, all of that was documented. All of it spoke on my behalf in a language far louder than his grievance. His influence was exactly as powerful as his career trajectory suggested. Which is to say, not very. Update 4. The boundary, and what it cost. I delivered my final answer in writing, because I wanted it to be clear and I wanted a record of it. I told him that I was not going to pay him anything. That I was not going to add him to my deed. That I had genuine gratitude for the introduction he had provided 6 years ago and that I had expressed that gratitude, sincerely and repeatedly, over the years since. That gratitude was real and it was complete. It did not translate into $70,000, equity in my apartment, or any other financial obligation. I told him that employee referrals do not influence hiring decisions at the company, which I had confirmed directly. That my promotions had each been earned through documented performance. That my certification costs had been paid out of my own pocket. That my apartment represented 5 years of deliberate saving and sacrifice that had nothing to do with him. That his contribution, one forwarded email, was approximately 0.001% of what had made my career possible, and that 0.001% does not entitle someone to 50% of the outcome. That this was not how contribution and reward work, not in any accounting system that had any relationship to reality. I told him I was sorry that our relationship had arrived at this place. That I had valued it. That I was genuinely sad about what it had become. He did not respond for 2 weeks. When he did, it was brief. He told me that I had shown him exactly who I was, and that he hoped I was satisfied with myself. We haven't spoken since. He wanted acknowledgement that he mattered. That his one email made him architect of my success. I couldn't give him that, because it wasn't true. His significance was 1 minute of typing. Everything else was mine. Resolution, the award, and the silence. 8 months after that dinner, my company held its annual performance recognition event. 500 people in a hotel ballroom. I received the award for top performance in my division, recognition for the year's results, the team I had built, the initiatives I had led. My team was in the audience. 11 people who had worked alongside me, trusted my judgment, followed my direction through a genuinely difficult operational year. When I walked to the stage, they stood. I hadn't expected that. It undid me slightly, in the best way. I stood at the podium with a small glass award in my hands and 500 people applauding, and I thought about the email. The one that allegedly created all of this. I thought about it for about 3 seconds. And then I thought about the 12,000 hours, the certification studied for on weekends, the late project nights, the mentors I had sought out and learned from, the failures I had absorbed and adjusted to, the relationships built through consistency and follow-through, the promotions won through performance that was documented and undeniable. I thought about 5 years of brown bag lunches and foregone vacations and careful savings that became a $139,000 apartment that is mine. One email didn't create the moment I was standing in. One email pointed me toward a door. I would have found a door. This one was convenient. Maybe it saved me a few weeks. Maybe it opened slightly more smoothly than one I would have found on my own. I don't diminish that. I thanked him for it, and the thanks was real. But the door is not the building. The introduction is not the career. The forwarded resume is not the 12,000 hours, the certifications, the promotions, the team, the award, the apartment, the life. My uncle is not in that hotel ballroom. He doesn't attend these events. His career has never reached the level that gets you into these rooms. He is, as far as I know, still at his desk, still at his title, still waiting for the recognition he has decided he is owed from the external world. We haven't spoken in 2 years. He's in the same job. I've been promoted twice. His resentment grows through inactivity. My career grows through work. We're both proving the same point. Success comes from what you do after the door opens, not from who opened it. Epilogue. What he actually wanted. 2 years out, I've thought a lot about what was really happening at that dinner. He didn't want $70,000. Or rather, he did, but the money was instrumental to something else. What he actually wanted was to matter. To be, in some official and binding way, the author of my success. To look at my career, my title, my apartment, my trajectory, and see himself in it. To be able to say, at family gatherings, at work, to himself in the quiet moments when careers and choices and the distance between where you hope to be and where you are get very loud. I did that. That's mine. I built that. He'd been the family's success story for years. Steady job, decent car, nice clothes, the reliable uncle with the company position. And then I joined his company and outpaced him within 4 years, and kept going, and the distance between where he was and where I was became something he had to explain to himself in a way he could live with. The explanation he chose was, I made him. It's a tragic explanation. I want to be precise about that word, tragic, not contemptible. There is something genuinely sad about a person who needs to colonize someone else's success in order to feel significant. Who watches another person's growth and cannot simply feel proud, because pride would require accepting that the growth happened independently. Who builds, year by year, an increasingly elaborate mythology around 30 seconds of typing. I couldn't give him what he needed. Not because I was being punishing or cold, but because what he needed was a lie, and I couldn't make the lie true by paying for it with my apartment. If I had given him $70,000, it wouldn't have validated his contribution. It would have validated his delusion, and delusions don't stay satisfied, they expand. He needed to find his own significance. From his own work. In his own life. That's not something I could do for him, and it's not something I owed him. Final words. My uncle sent one email 6 years ago recommending me for a job. I got the job through interviews, built a career through work, bought an apartment through savings. Now he wants half because his email started everything. By his logic, the first cause deserves more credit than all subsequent effort. The door opener matters more than the person who walked through. But here's what he forgets. I would have found a door. His was convenient, not essential. And everything behind the door, 12,000 hours of work, certifications earned, promotions won, relationships built, That was all me. Not his email. He wants $70,000 for 30 seconds of typing. He wants half my apartment because he knows someone who knows someone. That's not how success works. That's not how debt works. That's not how anything works. He created nothing but an introduction. I created everything that followed. The apartment stays mine. The career stays mine. The future stays mine. And his 30-second contribution stays exactly what it was. A small kindness that I thanked him for years ago and have now paid back in full, through his education in how success actually works. You don't get half of someone's life because you once helped them find a door. You get thanked. I thanked him. We're done. The apartment is mine. The career is mine. The award is mine. And the 12,000 hours, every late night, every certification, every solved problem, every earned promotion, those were always, only, entirely mine.